Federal Drive is presented by GEHA, Government Employees Health Association, proudly providing health and dental benefits to federal employees and their families. Visit GEHA.com.
And now, the Federal Drive with Terry Gerton, sponsored by GEHA.
Welcome to the Federal Drive on Federal News Network. It's Thursday, April 16th. I'm your host, Terry Gerton, and I'm glad you're here. Coming up on this hour of the Federal Drive, many former federal employees are navigating the job market for the first time in years and finding that networking looks and feels different than they remember. Plus, a proposed federal personnel shift could chill whistleblowers long before anyone gets fired. Those stories and much more ahead during this hour of the Federal Drive. We begin with this. The Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency will not offer internships to CyberCorps Scholarship for Service students this summer due to the government shutdown. It's the second year in a row CISA has withdrawn the internships. But the Office of Personnel Management is rolling out new cybersecurity job opportunities this week, and Federal News Network's Justin Doubleday is here to explain. Justin, let's start with CISA. What happened with these summer internships that have been canceled? You've raised this issue before.
Yeah, the CyberCorps program has had some challenges, or at least CyberCorps scholars have had some challenges finding opportunities. And CISA had given those scholars a boost when in December it announced that it would offer up to 100 cybersecurity internship roles this summer to both undergraduate and postgraduate students who are part of the CyberCorps program. But unfortunately, just this week, students started receiving messages from CISA officials saying that as of now, there will be no CyberCorps Scholarship for Service summer interns at the agency because of the lapse in appropriations. CISA, along with the rest of DHS, has been officially shut down since February 14th. And so while CISA had this plan back at the start of the year to offer all these internships, this now record partial government shutdown has really torpedoed those plans. And here we are, April 15th, not a lot of time before the summer. And so a lot of these scholars are now having to scramble to find alternative arrangements.
So there's no new internships for this summer, but are there students who are still going through the program? And if so, how does this change affect them?
Well, students are still going through the program. Their university, they get the CyberCorps scholarship through the program generally. CISA, though, is certainly one of the primary places that this program feeds into, whether it is active students who need to secure an internship as part of their CyberCorps responsibilities when they are still studying, or it is students who have graduated who now need to go find a federal job. And CISA, being the nation's cybersecurity agency, is certainly one of those first places that they look. And, at least for the internship cohort, there's no opportunities now at that big cyber agency this summer. And, CISA has actually not had a lot of job opportunities, full-time job opportunities over the last year. They've been shedding staff. And so this all kind of comes down to CISA is just not this place right now that these students who are looking to go into public service in cybersecurity roles can really look to, at least for the near future.
Are there other internship opportunities in the private sector that might count for these scholarships?
No. So by and large, the scholarships students have to either go to a federal agency, to a state and local agency. There are some federal research and development centers that count toward the internship qualifications. But the whole point of the program is, of course, to route folks into the public sector rather than, the much more alluring salaries that are in the private sector for cybersecurity experts.
I guess there is some good news here. OPM says it's going to offer some cybersecurity opportunities. Might those apply?
Yeah, this came out the same week. OPM announced that there is a new information cybersecurity specialist role through the U.S. Tech Force. The Tech Force, of course, being this new initiative under the Trump administration to recruit top tech talent into the government. And so this new cybersecurity specialist role will focus on protecting critical systems, strengthening federal cybersecurity capabilities, and just safeguarding the digital infrastructure that agencies operate on behalf of Americans. And so OPM actually mentioned as part of this announcement that they would be working with agencies to recruit cyber professionals, including individuals participating in the CyberCorps Scholarship for Service program. And so this could open up some opportunities, some full-time full-time opportunities for those cybercore scholars who are graduating or have already graduated and are still looking for that job that they need to get within the federal government to essentially pay back their scholarship.
That still doesn't address the internship requirement, though. So when you think about all of these changes together, what does the future look like for the cybercore program?
It's very uncertain. And I think, you also look at the National Science Foundation's latest budget request for fiscal 2027. The NSF funds the cybercore program, and it's administered in partnership with OPM. But the NSF funding for fiscal 2027 would cut 70% of the cybercore budget. It would go from a $72 million a year program down to $22 million per year if this budget request is approved. That, of course, means less scholarships in general. And so that raises even more questions about the Trump administration's commitment to this program in the long term. Right now, a lot of the cybercore scholars who I've been speaking to just see a general lack of opportunity across the federal government. It started last year with a federal hiring freeze. Many folks had internships offers and job offers revoked last year, and they were left kind of scrambling. The hiring freeze is lifted, but they're still not seeing a lot of entry-level cybersecurity job opportunities across the federal government. Maybe this OPM announcement will open things up a little bit, but in general, agencies just aren't posting a lot of jobs, and that means that cybercore scholars have a lot less opportunity than they have in the past to join the federal government.
How does this fit into the broader national cyber workforce strategy?
Well, we know that the cybercore program has been touted as key to past cyber workforce strategies. Certainly under the Biden administration, there was a cyber workforce and education strategy that was very comprehensive across the board from, pre-K all the way up through college and beyond, and focused on things like skills-based hiring and other things like that. But cybercore was a part of that. The Trump administration has rolled out a national cybersecurity strategy just earlier this year. Workforce talent is a part of that, but there's not a lot of details on what that means yet. What are they going to do with their cyber workforce and education approach? That remains to be seen.
That's Federal News Network's Justin Doubleday. Justin, thanks for this update.
Thanks, Terry.
You can find his story at federalnewsnetwork.com. Up next, many former federal employees are navigating the job market for the first time in years and finding that networking looks and feels different than they remember. This is The Federal Drive with Terry Gerton on Federal News Network. Welcome back to The Federal Drive with Terry Gerton on Federal News Network. Many former federal employees are navigating the job market for the first time in years, only to find that the rules around hiring and networking have shifted. Research suggests that the process feels more transactional, but that doesn't mean experience and competence no longer matter. Helping us make sense of the new normal is Managing Director of Business Intelligence at Express Employment International, Stephanie Miller. Stephanie, thanks so much for joining me this morning.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
A lot of former federal employees are newly back on the job market, in some cases for the first time in decades. From what your research shows, what is surprising them most about how hiring and networking are working today?
I think that what's really changed is it's used to be a very linear experience. And now you really have to think about going about the processes like, what are the things that I need to do? It's not just applying to one area. It could be using multiple resources, both social media, third-party help like a staffing company, doing some direct outreach yourself. So it is managing the whole process instead of before. I think it was a little bit more clear and linear.
Your survey recently found that many professionals now describe networking as transactional rather than personal. We've always heard build your network, engage your network. When we say networking now, what kinds of behaviors are we actually talking about?
Yes, I think what we're looking for is we want to build your brand, if you will, in all different areas. So when you think about your LinkedIn accounts and your social media accounts and how you put your resume together, you want that voice of who you are to be very clear and concise, because oftentimes people will see one or more approaches to your background before you even have a chance to speak. So you're trying to be really concise on who you are and get that message across, because it doesn't often happen as relational as it used to, with a phone call or an in-person interview as the first point of contact. So you're just trying to get it in every direction, where when somebody sees who you are and what your experience is, it's showing your voice and what you have to offer.
You started that response with a word that might scare a lot of people, branding. What's your brand? It sounds very vogue, I guess, but what does that really mean for people? What should they be trying to communicate?
Again, I think when we consider our career, if you go back even not too long ago, it was the thought of, I'm applying for a job, a career. Today, your experience and your education and what you're open to can be different than that. And a lot of times what you're trying to give the future employer or your future position is, what are some of the things that weren't on your resume that you offer to that company? Is it flexibility or leadership? Those are pieces that we used to really focus on, like hard skill. And now we want to give the whole picture and show, where is our adaptability and how can I really portray that to my future employer? Because we're looking for that when we're trying to make new hires. And so I think it's a little bit broader of a sense of, what am I willing to do and what do I bring to the table? And a lot of those soft skills and other experiences are important. And we want to be able to showcase that.
You're hitting on something that is a concern we hear from a lot of former feds. These are folks who have spent sometimes decades in very technical, deep expertise kinds of positions. Their resume runs multiple pages, and it's really challenging for them to get down to those kind of nuggets about skills and what they offer. What are the big recommendations that you offer there?
Well, I think that's where that networking helps. It isn't just reliant on our resume anymore. The resume is a great depiction of experience, but what you want to do is bring that human piece back. There's so many attributes that people have that even they overlook. So what is that first impression that you can make? And how do you bring your communication style, if you will, to things like your LinkedIn account and your social media? I think those are ways where we start to delineate ourselves from just our qualifications, but more who we are as a future employee. And, when you think about that, if it's been a while and it feels, I don't know, intimidating to decide what that should be or how to approach it, using multiple sources like a staffing company can help you just ask somebody, what should I be highlighting? What are the questions that I could consider myself, so I know what skills I have that maybe I haven't put on a resume? Oftentimes, if you've worked in something for so long, you almost take for granted some of the wonderful things you bring to an employer. You need somebody else to look at it and say, don't forget, you led this, or you were impactful here. So having, even if it's a professional friend or colleague, look at what you've done and give you some of that feedback, you can find those true pieces of who you are that you just need to let shine, because it's more than just qualifications. It's how we're going to re-engage with potentially a different type of company. Now we're going private industry or something like that. So it's having that other voice, because I think people tend to downplay their own experience, specifically if they've done it a long time and they just feel like it's part of everyday job,
I'm speaking with Stephanie Miller. She's Managing Director of Business Intelligence at Express Employment International. Stephanie, I want to follow up on what you just said, because again, coming at it from the Fed or former Fed perspective, these are folks who've been trained to be pretty humble about what can be massive accomplishments. How do they get over that, humility obstacle to really be able to present their talents and their skills to a new employer in a way that engages them?
Certainly. I think the first thing is just to understand that the market isn't harder. It's just a little different. And so understanding those differences gives you that confidence that, okay, with the right preparation, I can get everything aligned and put my voice into the market, and there is opportunity. We have places for people to really grow and take their career to the next step. but really having that adaptability to understand that you need to bring in multiple facets of communication, like your LinkedIn accounts and revising your resume and meeting with those colleagues and really providing that insight to what you bring to your new employer will help you navigate feeling like, oh, this has been a long time, or I'm not sure where to go. So I would say prepare and then understand it's going to be a little bit different, but there is great opportunity out there.
Well, let's circle back then to the networking question. And you've described a number of social media approaches to networking. A lot of people think, in the old days, it was going to job fairs and glad handing and meeting people. So for folks who are re-entering the job market now, how should they be thinking about networking in terms of specific steps, specific outreach? Where do they start?
I would start with your own network. So you have people that you've worked with. Be intentional on who those people are. It's amazing what we can do as a community of, professionals. What are they looking at? What are they seeing in the market? And then, take that information and really reflect on, are you open to different roles or contract-based positions? Are there things you haven't considered that could be a viable option for you? And so having that idea that I don't want to assume this is going to be exactly like my last job search. I want to be prepared for what I'm open to and what I frankly don't want to do. That gets your mind in the right set to begin the preparation process. And then do your online presence. Find third-party help if you have it in your community so that you get that professional guidance. All of those things will make this much easier for them.
Let's flip this over to the employer side, the hiring manager. What are they most looking for as they're considering new applicants? And when they look at a former Fed, what comes to mind for them?
I think that there is maybe a preconception that if you were a federal employee, that it was very structured and traditional. And what we see with employers is there is a little bit more weight in adaptability and flexibility. So companies are navigating change much quicker than they have in the past, and even qualifying positions at a higher level, meaning even if it was an entry-level position before, it has a higher technical requirement today just because of how business operates. So I would say that if you could assess your ability to highlight those things, I would. That's what companies are looking for.
And we're hearing a lot about AI as the mediator in this space. What's your piece of advice for how folks should be thinking about that as they're considering building their networks and new opportunities?
I think that AI will impact virtually most positions, but it's not going to replace them. So what is the human factor that cannot be replaced by AI? If we can really identify that functionality, then we will always be needed in our workspace. So that's what I would think about. How do you make this human? What are the pieces you bring that cannot be replaced? And many positions, almost all of them have that piece. It's just about retraining our mindset, our framework of what we offer and how we get companies to understand my expertise along with my ability to learn technology will bring what to the company? That's the question we want to answer.
I've been speaking with Stephanie Miller. She's Managing Director of Business Intelligence at Express Employment International. Stephanie, thanks so much for joining me, and thanks so much for this very practical advice. We'll post this interview at federalnewsnetwork.com/Federal Drive. Subscribe to the Federal Drive wherever you get your podcasts. Still to come, a big tax refund feels good, but getting more of your money throughout the year may feel better. But first, a proposed federal personnel shift could chill whistleblowers long before anyone gets fired. You're listening to the Federal Drive with Terry Gerton on Federal News Network. Welcome back to the Federal Drive with Terry Gerton on Federal News Network. As agencies begin reclassifying parts of the federal workforce to schedule policy career, the Project on Government Oversight warns that shifts in the rules may carry real consequences for whistleblowers. Their analysis argues Congress, not agencies, is the real backstop for ensuring protections apply regardless of classification. Here to walk us through the risk is Joe Spielberger, Senior Policy Counsel at POGO. Joe, thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you so much. It's great to be on the show with you.
We have talked a lot on this program about schedule policy career and the rule that OPM finalized in February. So I don't want to dig into the basics of that with you, but what POGO is focusing on now is the whistleblower impact. So from your perspective, how does this policy change the risk calculus for federal employees and when or when they might not speak up?
So employees who find themselves involuntarily reclassified and transferred under schedule policy career, they will lose critical whistleblower protections. So right now, most federal whistleblowers who face retaliation can go to the Office of Special Counsel and appeal to the Merit Systems Protection Board, but schedule policy career closes off that path. While the rule claims that whistleblowers will retain protections, in practice, instead of appealing to the MSPB, protections from prohibited personnel practices, particularly whistleblower retaliation, will now be only enforced internally. And so those protections are likely to just be merely symbolic because the rule only requires agencies to establish internal policies. So this could look very different agency to agency without any consistency. And it doesn't just make whistleblowers more vulnerable to retaliation, but it forces them to appeal for protection from the same agencies they're alleging are retaliating against them. So this itself is already concerning even before acknowledging the recent trends that we've seen across agencies. For example, the Department of Defense denigrating military whistleblowers and undermining the Pentagon's Inspector General's office, the Justice Department purging itself of agents and prosecutors for political reasons and refusing to investigate senior leadership misconduct, the EPA rolling back protections for defending scientific integrity, HUD whistleblowers being fired for raising concerns around civil rights and fair housing enforcement being weakened, and on and on and on. And so at the end of the day, whistleblowing is already inherently very risky. And without any sense of independent enforcement and accountability, it will certainly make whistleblowers think more than twice whether they feel they can safely and effectively come forward and speak out when there's wrongdoing happening in the federal government.
Federal law already has whistleblower protections on the books. Are those protections not going to be enough for the folks who might be reclassified to schedule policy career?
Again, it's less about protections that exist on paper, and it's more about whether those protections will actually be taken seriously and enforced. And so even now, there are already concerns, across the government of undermining independent watchdogs, which includes Inspector General's offices, includes the Office of Special Counsel and the MSPB. So there are already those concerns where we're seeing cracks in the system. And by completely removing any independent external path forward, again, you're really assuming that agencies will do the right thing and establish these internal processes. But again, what we've seen throughout this administration, agency after agency, they have been systematically targeting their own employees for expressing dissent, those who are perceived to be politically disloyal, and in some cases, for simply doing the jobs for which they were hired to do. And so there's not a lot of confidence that agencies can be trusted to establish effective internal processes and to enforce protections for whistleblowers.
I'm speaking with Joe Spielberger. He's Senior Policy Counsel at POGO. Joe, one of your key arguments is that the threat of reclassification can itself be chilling. When you think about that, what does retaliation look like in this context if it doesn't come as a formal firing?
Retaliation exists in a number of different ways. So there are those clear examples of direct retaliation, like being investigated, being suspended, being placed on administrative leave, demoted, and being fired for retaliatory reasons. And retaliation also exists in less direct ways as well. So at the end of the day, are civil servants able to use their expertise to defend scientific integrity? Can they push back against attempts to politicize research and analysis? And what's important to emphasize is that we have whistleblower protection laws in place because whistleblowers perform such a vital public service. So this is not about protecting the jobs of individuals. At the end of the day, this is about protecting our health, our safety, our security. Whistleblowers have these protections so that they can sound the alarm about illegal orders. They can help protect the public from serious health concerns. They can ensure communities can rebuild after natural disasters. They can help enforce our civil rights and our civil liberties. And so at the end of the day, that's what this is ultimately about. Whether the Constitution and the rule of law and speaking the truth will continue to matter in this country, and whether we will one day be able to have a government that truly serves in the best interests of the people.
You make the point that Congress could step in and act directly here. What are the most important steps they could take to ensure whistleblower protections apply, regardless of how an employee is classified?
One of the most critical things that Congress can do right now is legislate, particularly to provide whistleblowers with direct access to federal court when they don't receive timely administrative relief. This is both a long-time priority for good governance organizations and made all the more urgent right now because of the implementation of schedule policy career. That's the most critical thing and most urgent thing that Congress can do right now. At the same time, whistleblowing, of course, exists across just about every sector and touches just about every issue concerning government operations, and that's important to the community. And even in a culture of polarization and politicization, whistleblowing is one core issue that still retains some bipartisan interest and support in Congress. So this year, there are opportunities to strengthen protections for military service members, federal contractors, members of the intelligence community, and to address some of the emerging issues like AI and different threats. And so there are a lot of ways that Congress can act right now, both to begin clawing back a real semblance of whistleblower protections with independent enforcement and continue to ensure that whistleblowing remains a bipartisan concern, both for Congress and the public, to ensure that people who are in these critical roles and responsible for serving the public across the country, that they can continue to safely come forward and speak out and do the right thing to ensure that agencies across the government can better fulfill their core missions to people across the country.
There have been some recent attempts at legislation, as you just described, but they haven't made it all the way through. So for federal workers who may find themselves reclassified into schedule policy career positions, while they're waiting and hoping that Congress might take some action, what are your recommendations for them if they find waste, fraud, and abuse that they think they need to speak out about and that they would prefer to have whistleblower protection for?
One of the most important things that they can do as early on in the process is consult with a licensed attorney. Now, this is especially important because we understand that there is a lot of confusion and misinformation about what rights and protections will still exist, different pathways that are available to them. And so talking with an attorney can be really helpful for them to make the most informed decision. There are also different ways in and outside of government to sound the alarm about wrongdoing. Organizations like POGO receive whistleblower disclosures through a tip line. Other partner organizations provide direct legal representation. And so there is a growing network of support for federal workers who are trying to understand their rights, their protections, and how they can safely, effectively sound the alarm when things go wrong.
I've been speaking with Joe Spielberger. He's Senior Policy Counsel at the Project on Government Oversight. Joe, thanks so much for your helpful guidance today.
Thank you, Terry. It's always a pleasure being on.
We'll post this interview at federalnewsnetwork.com/Federal Drive. Subscribe to the Federal Drive wherever you get your podcasts. Coming up next, a big tax refund feels good, but getting more of your money throughout the year may feel better. This is the Federal Drive with Terry Gerton on Federal News Network. Welcome back to the Federal Drive with Terry Gerton on Federal News Network. Many federal employees treat tax refunds as a bonus, even though they reflect pay that could have arrived earlier with different planning. In a moment when many families are reassessing work, finances, and long-term decisions like college, timing and strategy matter. Here to help feds think through both is President of Armed Forces Mutual, Mike Meese. Mike, it's great to have you back. Thanks for joining me.
Great to be here, Terry.
All right, we have passed the April 15th tax filing deadline. Maybe people are wiping their brow and sighing in relief that they got their taxes in. But the next step is to think about tax refunds, and people have been promised big ones this year. If you get a big tax refund, how should you think about planning for that financially?
Well, it's a great question because actually, even last year before the larger refunds, last year, the average refund was $3,100. And that's enough to erase 4 months of credit card debt for the average person that has credit card interest. So if you're going to get a refund back, first things you want to do is look at where do you have debts that you should be paying off, for example, and the first place to start is credit card debt. So I would use your tax refund to pay that off. And if you don't have credit card debt, then that's the time to potentially start an emergency fund so that if you do have something, a car repair or something like that, you can pay for that directly and not have to go into debt in those cases.
That's a very sensible approach, but that's not how most people think about their tax refund. It's like a vacation fund or a shopping excursion.
That's right. And again, hopefully you're in a circumstance where you don't have a lot of credit card debt. If you're fortunate in those kinds of positions, then you should go ahead and spend that because, the government's been withholding that money for a long time. You've been depriving yourself of a little bit of what you could spend that money on. So you may want to spend that on yourselves. What I encourage people to do is kind of do the 2/3, 1/3 rule. Take 2/3 of that refund. Let's say it's $3,000. Put the $2,000 into longer term savings, either your thrift savings plan, your 401k, something that will help you in retirement and may reduce your taxes next year if you put it into one of those tax advantaged accounts, and then spend 1/3 and increase, go out to dinner, help contribute to your family vacation so that you can take advantage of at least 1/3 of that tax refund if you don't need to pay off credit card debt.
Mike, sometimes people think about this tax-paying approach as a forced saving so that they do get that big income. But given the affordability challenges that so many people are facing, doesn't it make more sense to recalculate your withholding so that that money stays in your pocket on a monthly basis and doesn't go to the government?
Yeah, especially when we see higher gas prices and higher costs across the board, you probably want more of that money now. And especially you don't want to put that stuff on credit card debt. So you're paying that money and then paying interest on top of that. To do that, now is a good time. If you got a large tax refund, it probably means you're withholding too much. You can go to the irs.gov calculator, and they have a complete withholding calculator where you put in all of your facts, all of the details, and it'll explain how much you should be withholding out of every paycheck so that you are withholding the right amount at the end of the year. And then if it turns out that you're withholding too much, and again, this is important for, especially for couples when you have two different employers, if both of you say that you're withholding married with two kids or whatever, you may end up being withholding more money than you should be. You can then go back to your employer and change using the Form W-4 so that you're withholding less money. Let me mention, especially for federal employees, you can also use any retired pay. So for example, I retired from the military, and so I adjust the tax withholding with the Defense Finance and Accounting Service so that it withholds the right amount of both state taxes and federal taxes to get that as close to zero as possible so that you're not withholding too much money.
I'm speaking with Mike Meese. He's president of Armed Forces Mutual. Mike, at this time in the spring, not only are people thinking about taxes, but many families are also thinking about college decisions. Their high school seniors are making decisions about colleges and also about financial aid. So walk us through some of the programs for military and veterans and families that can help defray some of the college expenses.
Well, the most valuable one for people that are in the military is the post 9/11 GI Bill. That provision under Chapter 33 of the VA Code provides for 36 months of benefits for either a service member or while they're on active duty. If they've had more than 6 years, they can transfer that to their spouse or to their dependent children, and it'll pay for 36 months of in-state tuition at any college or university within the United States. It also provides for housing allowance equal to the basic allowance for housing for an E5 in that area, as well as a stipend for books. So it's a huge advantage that people should consider taking advantage of.
And you said that also applies to spouses.
It does. The important thing is while you're on active duty, you have to transfer it to your spouses and children. Let me explain a little bit about how that works. You have 36 months. So in my case, I had two daughters. I transferred 18 months to each of those two daughters. As long as you transfer at least 1 month to somebody, you can always move that around. So by transferring 18 months to each daughter, if one of them ended up not needing the money, I could transfer it over to the other child. In my case, I ended up having them go to University of Connecticut, George Mason University, and so that worked out very well. And because they also pay for the housing allowance, that actually gives you a little bit more money that you can stretch that further. One other really important tip that people don't realize is that sometimes there's extra money left over. So when your child graduates, call up the VA and you have to call them to find out, are there any months left? After both of my daughters graduated, I found out I have actually 4.5 months left of tuition. So at some point I may want to go take some night school classes just to take advantage of that benefit that I have.
Well, the GI Bill is a federal program. Do states also have veteran assistance programs for tuition?
They do, especially in Virginia. One of my other things that I do is I work with George Mason University as the rector of the Board of Visitors there. And all Virginia schools has the Virginia Military Survivors Independence Education Program. For any Virginia military person who is 90% disabled or has a Purple Heart or has died due to their wounds or in combat, all of their spouses and children are eligible to go tuition free to any Virginia college. And so it's a huge advantage that people can and should take advantage of, especially with the great public colleges that we have in Virginia.
And so for veterans and military families in other states, they should check with that state to see if there are similar programs.
Exactly. And the other thing that people should consider doing, whether you're in the military or not, is savings through 529 programs. The federal 529 program allows you, it's kind of like a 401k for education. You put money in and then it grows tax-free. And as long as it's used for a valid educational expense, it comes out tax-free. The advantage, if you're in either Maryland or Virginia, is all of that money that you put in there comes off of your taxes. So I'm saving right now now I'm up to 8 grandchildren, and I love my grandchildren every month. But especially on April 15th, all of the money that I contributed to their eventual college education came off of my Virginia state taxes, so saved me money on April 15th as well.
Might be another good spot for your tax refund.
Exactly. And money that goes in there, you never pay taxes on it when it comes out, as long as it's used for a valid educational purpose. And again, similar to the post 9/11 GI Bill, if one child doesn't need it because they get a scholarship or they go to a service academy, you can always transfer that money to the other children. And in the new Secure Act, you can even give that to them and to help them start with their own 401k.
Mike, is there a central repository or website where folks can go to kind of get a comprehensive list of all of these programs?
They're kind of spread out. We have a lot of very good stuff on our website, on our resource center at American Armed Forces Mutual Aid Association.com. So AAFMAA.com. If you look under there under college resources, that can provide a lot of this information, as well as for the VA programs like the post 9/11 GI Bill. The VA.gov is very good. And that Virginia also has that. If you look up just Virginia Military Service Survivors and Dependent Education Program, you can find that on their website.
I've been speaking with Mike Meese. He's president of Armed Forces Mutual. Mike, thanks for all this wise advice.
Great. Thank you, Terry.
We'll post this interview at federalnewsnetwork.com/Federal Drive. Hear the Federal Drive on demand. Subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. The IRS is touting its performance during this year's filing season as evidence that it can still carry out its tax duties despite losing more than a quarter of its workforce under the Trump administration. The agency's top official says technology improvements at the IRS are making it easier for taxpayers to get help online and that it's seen a year-over-year decrease in phone calls. Federal News Network's Jory Heckman is here with more details. Jory, thanks for joining me.
Hey, Terry.
All right. So Mr. Bisignano testified about the IRS on tax day. What did he say about how the IRS's performance looks during the tax filing season?
Right. So by the numbers, the IRS did overall meet its goals and objectives here. The agency received more than 134 million individual tax returns and issued more than 80 million refunds. About 98% of those returns and refunds were both submitted and received electronically, so the vast majority of those. And those who did get a refund, 90% of those taxpayers received those refunds within 21 days or less. The average tax refund was about $3,400, which is an 11% increase compared to the prior year. And Bisignano said that this was the most successful filing season in IRS history and felt pretty vindicated by the performance, even though the IRS lost about 27% of its workforce compared to this period last year.
How is the IRS dealing with those staffing cuts?
Yeah, so Bisignano said that the IRS is looking to step up in terms of technology, in terms of automation, to do more with less. Part of what he said to members of the Senate Finance Committee is that the IRS can deal with less people and still have better results. And so the IRS is going to continue to step up ways to have more taxpayers get their help online by themselves, not have to rely on calling the IRS and hoping that someone on the other end will pick up and be able to answer them. However, the workforce cuts have been really acute in the technology field here. That last December, the IRS permanently moved more than 1,000 of its employees out of its tech shop. A lot of those employees were put on temporary details this filing season to help out with answering phone calls, with processing tax returns, but none of those employees have really been told what they'll be doing for the agency in the long term. And it was only recently that the IRS's chief information officer said that the agency's tech workforce saw about a 40% decrease and an 80% loss in its leadership compared to last year.
Did all of those staffing cuts result in any unusual hiccups during this year's filing season?
There are a couple notable ones. We reported just a few weeks ago that the IRS, in the 11th hour before the tax filing season, told some of its employees that they received W-2s that were inaccurate, that they actually didn't correctly calculate the overtime wages for some employees, and that all changed under the One Big Beautiful Bill Act that passed last summer. And so if they had already filed their tax returns for the year, these IRS employees were being told to submit amended returns. That's overall, it's a drop in the bucket compared to the 134 million tax returns that were submitted. And going back to the 98% of refunds that were received electronically, there were some taxpayers, about 1.5 million taxpayers, who did not submit direct deposit information for any number of reasons. They may be unbanked. They may just prefer that paper check that they're used to receiving, but they didn't give that information to the IRS. And as a result, they were waiting about 10 weeks to receive that paper check.
What was the reaction from the committee members to Mr. Bisignano's testimony?
The committee chairman, Mike Crapo, said that while no tax filing season is perfect, he was really happy with the performance of the IRS this year. He said that the filing season proceeded smoothly for tens of millions of Americans. Democrats on the committee, however, were pretty critical of these IRS staffing cuts, saying that they will, in the long term, really be detrimental to the IRS's ability to handle its enforcement operations, go after people who are not paying their fair share, and assist in taxpayers who are trying to pay what they owe to the agency. And we heard this prominently from the ranking member, Ron Wyden. He really was concerned that the IRS is going to see worse service to customers as a result of these layoffs that we saw last year.
Well, to that point, did Mr. Bisignano offer any insight as what the rest of 2026 might bring for the IRS?
Yeah, so there's going to be a focus for sure on further improvements to its online capabilities. He pointed to the fact that IRS.gov saw a 60% increase in traffic volume this filing season. As a result of some added capabilities to the website, they have seen a year-over-year decrease in phone calls, and that he says that the call wait time for taxpayers who do get through to an IRS employee, that's down to the single digits, around 9 minutes overall.
That's Federal News Network's Jory Heckman. Jory, thanks for this update.
Thanks, Terry.
You can find his story at federalnewsnetwork.com. The Federal Drive with Terry Gerton is produced by Eric White and Michelle Sandiford. Our web editor is Stephanie Wright. For the latest updates, stay with federalnewsnetwork.com or follow us on Facebook, YouTube, and LinkedIn. I'm Terry Gerton. Thanks for listening.